I'm Andy Green, and this week we're talking about the power of flowers because this is the Naked Man Podcast.
A few months back, a woman with a podcast booking agency reached out to me and suggested a guest for this podcast. I receive random emails like this often, and they usually seem like they're sent by a bot or certainly not by anyone who actually knows the podcast. This lead felt a little different this time and indeed led to my guest for today's episode, Katie Hess, the founder of LOTUSWEI, flower elixirs that enhance personal growth. She's an expert in flower alchemy and believes that her flower elixirs could aid in tearing down emotional walls and be the gateway to your truest self. Given that flowers are often seen as strictly feminine, Katie believes that these flowers could be key to breaking down traditional norms and help men experience true masculinity. Okay, then, color me intrigued. This felt mysterious in the most Andy way, lighting up my curiosity and zen for exploration. And besides, who doesn't like flowers? So I reached out to Katie and we Zoomed and discussed possible avenues for a conversation. And she quickly followed up and sent me a generous shipment of these elixirs, sprays, anointing oils, and to use these past few months. And now we are finally here, leading to this moment where Katie has offered to give me a flower essence consultation, sort of a hybrid podcast episode. We'll see where we go to help, I guess, further my journey to become more me. So with that, I'm going to cede the stage to Katie. Katie, welcome to the Naked Man Podcast.
Woo! Thank you.
Woo.
Good to be here.
Thank you. I'm excited you're here.
And thank you for taking the flower essences for as long as you have.
It's been, I mean, we can talk about my up and down in terms of usage, because I know I did postpone this the first time because I realized I hadn't really gotten into it yet. And I felt like I wanted to give it a more fair shot to actually see if I had felt any difference. And that was also combined with, there was travel. I have also changed my meds twice in the past couple of months. Oh, so wow. It's sort of been this it has been a time of, I think, increased anxiety and uncertainty and sort of just been not necessarily rough time, but it's been difficult. But I'll do the spoiler alerts right now. I never did. I think it was recommended 5 times a day for each of these things or sort of as needed. Okay. And I and this will, I think, say a lot about me. Even knowing I'm doing this podcast, it's really hard for me to do that, to stick to something like that. But the as needed was what I did and how I used it. I realized that I was doing this. It was whenever I was feeling anxious, whenever I was sort of in that spinning wheel thing where I'm catching myself on the to-do list or feeling like I am not, I'm basically a hamster in the wheel of my apartment, grabbing things. I had these in a prominent spot in our living room and I would see them and I would stop and take the one in that moment or two that felt like I sort of needed. And oftentimes I would say that was the inner peace, because clearly I was not exhibiting that, or I certainly didn't have external peace. So that it sort of came to be like a little mini meditation or a little mini stop. And I think that in itself was helpful, clearly. But I think that's sort of the usage. And I did bring it to a softball game once and a spray, and I brought the Game Changer spray. And we did win that game. I offered it to people who wanted it. We were already winning when I did it, but I just sort of felt like, we needed a rally. The one person who was the most gung-ho about it, he was the best player from then on. So shout out to Danny. And I'm like, maybe I need to just bring them all the sprays and have them in the dugout for this next season, just there in case anyone needs them.
That's such a cool idea, because I know there's one particular blend called Quiet Mind that golfers love because it makes them so meditative and it improves their golf game. But I haven't made any other correlations between specific sports and flower essence blends. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. I mean, I think I was just like, well, game changer. I mean, it's in the name, but also it's just sort of, it feels like when you want to shake something up, or when you, I think, yeah, just want to change or kind of own the power. That's how I sort of thought about it. So yeah, how did all that stuff hit you? And can we come up with a proprietary softball blend?
Absolutely. Okay. Wow. Okay. So many things have happened.
Yeah.
Which was the one that you used the most? Inner peace?
Inner peace and true strength were the ones that it felt like I either needed or was desiring in that moment. And I think the inner peace was like a reaction to me noticing my anxiety, whereas the true strength was, I think, when I was feeling sort of nervous, like for something in the future, like rather, I mean, it's definitely anxiety still, but it was more like, I mean, I took all of them before this, and the things that I was really, that were really important or I was really nervous about, I kind of did the whole round. But I think true strength was, when I was sort of wanted to embody me, I think, and my strength, and sort of talk myself out of like the fears associated with what I was doing, and being like, okay, no, I can own this.
Maybe what we'll start with is like, for any of your listeners who are not familiar with this.
Oh, yes, that's probably a good idea.
This is like pretty, I mean, we're just kind of getting to a point where like the American culture is like really looking for something like this. I've been doing this work for the past 20 years. And when I first started, it was like, seen as something super woo, because we're not talking about aromatherapy, although we do use a lot of aromatherapy in our products and things. We're actually talking about a very subtle form of, it's almost like homeopathic medicine, in that we're only using the life force of flowers and sometimes plants and trees. So like, what does that actually mean? In the olden days, we see in cultures all over the world, doctors, alchemists, medicine men and women recommending to their patients to go search for specific flowers and drink the dewdrops every morning. You think it's hard to take your elixirs every day? Try going to like hunt dew every morning.
Hunt dew. That sounds like a Mountain Dew commercial, unfortunately.
And he's going dew hunting.
Dew hunting, yeah.
So it's like, it's been around. It's just been in a different form. And it wasn't until the 1930s, 40s that a doctor in the UK figured out how to scale it, put it in a bottle, so that we can essentially take all of those amazing qualities from nature and bring them into our crazy busy lives. Because not all of us have time to be going out into the wild like we wish we did. And then, like you can look at things like bees are not attracted to flowers based on color or scent like we had thought. They're actually communicating through these electrical frequencies being emitted by flowers. They can feel them in the little hairs on their legs. And there's this crazy communication occurring between the two. So if that's happening with bees, can that not also be happening with humans? Of course. Absolutely. Like in all our crazy wisdom, we go out into the wild, and it's not just the oxygen at play. We know how to download, upload, information from Mother Nature. That's just like in our energetic system. We know how to do that. We knew how to do that as kids. And when we were kids, we were very well aware of how magical this world, the natural world, was that we live in, right? We knew. And then we got all like old and curmudgeon-y and adulty and like very skeptical of everything, right? Because we don't want to feel stupid. We don't want to feel like a fool. We don't want to feel like somebody's selling us snake oil and pulling one over on us.
Right. And also people, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but also, I just also think that sort of was beaten out of us too. Like we don't have time, like we're told that we don't have time to just sit and enjoy a flower, or in the natural world. It's sort of like, oh, it has to be on the weekend, or like something you have to really plan to do, rather than it just being your everyday life. But yeah, sorry. Right.
Well, and that's a good point. Is it's also like in today's day and age, it's like recreation. And in the past, it might have been like our medicine, people like allopathic Western medicine. This idea of like popping a pill to fix things has only been around for a couple hundred years. Before that, Mother Nature was our medicine. People went to the woods. We dug up the roots. We ate the leaves. We worked with like all the different medicines of the earth. And it, some would say that it was kind of strategically removed from our culture at a certain particular time, so that pharmaceutical medicine could really, make loads of money at the right timing.
Right.
So we're in this like interesting position or like timing of our culture where we have the best of both worlds and we can explore both, which is kind of exciting. And good on you for, just diving in and saying like, I'll try these, I'll take them and I'll see what happens. That's the best way to know. Some people are like, well, how do I really know? I love skeptical people. I think it's a great quality. I think we need more critical thinking today. We need more people that are like, really? Let me ask some questions. I love that quality. And so the only way to really know does it work is to try it yourself. That's the only way.
Yeah.
So let's see. Based on your story, I would say if you were to take them 5 times a day, which for some people it's a pain in the butt, right? Take something 5 times a day seems like a lot. The other thing you can do is just take like a dropper full, because these are, did I say? I can't remember.
Yeah. I said it at the beginning. So like there's 3 different types. There's the elixir that's like a drop, like sort of a tincture that you could put in a drink. I actually just sort of put it in my mouth because I, for the most part, like the taste of them. I actually ranked them in terms of taste, and I thought I could tell you which one, what that would mean about myself, perhaps. But then there's the anointing oils, which you can put on your body, and then, sorry, I don't know why I'm explaining your products, but
you should. That's great.
And then the Aura Mist spray, which I saw you put on before, and that's just a spray, which I really wanted to love, but since I'm sort of a moist person already, it just sort of made me feel sweaty. And that's like not a feeling that I want to go toward more. So I stuck with mostly the elixirs for this.
That's so funny. Yeah, the elixirs I think are the easiest because you can just drop them in. Like if you like the taste, you put them in your mouth, but like just drop them in your coffee, water, tea. That's kind of an easy way to like get them in more often. The more you use them, the more you'll experience the results. But even if you just take them a couple of times, I'm sure something was happening in there. I will say there are 2 things that will slow down the process of being able to feel the results. Because typically we'll say, if you're using it that often, you will feel a difference in 3 to 5 days. Something like a subtle shift in your thinking or perceiving or feeling or energy level, the way you're seeing the world. There are 2 things that would slow that down. One is some pharmaceutical medications will delay the results for 1 month. So if we look at, you had 2 med changes. I wonder what those were. Let's see. Okay, so there's that. And then
I can tell you what they were if you want, if you know. Okay, great. So I mean, I think when we originally talked and when I first started them, I was on Prozac. And then I moved to, what did I move to? Well, I know I'm on Effexor right now. Yeah. I believe that's what it is. And then, what's the one in between? It's like a very, No, it's actually, it was Lexapro. And that one, I just felt no effects whatsoever. And so now I'm on Effexor it's been like a couple of weeks now. Okay.
So typically, and I didn't tell you this before, so.
I kind of had a thought about that, but I wanted to.
Yeah. So if you're actively working with some sort of like psychotropic medication, like any of the ones that you mentioned, so antidepressants, anti-anxiety, anything that's going to affect your mood, typically it will slow down you being able to perceive the results or the effects of the flower essences by 1 month. So if for folks who aren't taking them, they might feel it like right away in the first week. For folks who are working with psychotropics, it might take like a good 5 weeks to like really feel the difference. That would also hold true for someone who smokes a lot of marijuana or does any kind of street drugs, or like consumes huge amounts of white sugar.
I want to know what huge amounts means, but I think for me it would be. I do edibles probably more than, I don't use any street drugs or anything like that, but I do edibles. And I'll say right now, there's a reason I still do the edibles, even with meds. It's that is the thing that I feel the most relaxed on and actually feel the effects of. So more so than the meds. And I admit that I'm going into the pharmaceuticals with the same level of skepticism as well. And just like, well, I might as well try. Right. But anyway, I think, so far, marijuana is my favorite of the drugs. And then, it's interesting that also delays this.
Well, the really cool thing is that flower essences will not contraindicate with anything. So you can literally take them with anything. And I love your strategy of just trying things for yourself and knowing for yourself. that there isn't somebody with a white coat who's saying, Andy, you need to do this and that's it, like for the rest of your life. I really like and appreciate your attitude of like, well, I'm going to see what happens. If it doesn't work for me, I'm going to change it in everything that you're doing. I think that's really commendable. Thank you. There's no contraindications. The cool thing, I'll just share this with you privately. Nothing's really private, right? But that every single client I've ever had, they've all gotten off pharmaceuticals. It's really interesting. I never say peep. I never say you should. I never say you shouldn't. I never say anything about it. I figure it's not really any of my business. But I would say after like 2 to 3 months, inevitably every client would come and say, you know what? I don't really feel like I need this anymore. And so they would stop, so it's a really interesting process, and I'm not exactly sure, energetically what's happening in terms of alignment. But that's something to like look out for and see, if you want.
Yeah, that's interesting, because I think in that 3-month period, that's sort of where I'm at. And I do sort of question it, because it's like, well, if it's not necessarily, if I'm not noticing any differences, and also I'm now like having this sort of thought of like, oh, I wonder if there is something energetically with the flowers and what that is, that's almost like influencing my body or my mind to be like, no, you don't need that. Just pick me. Just pick the flowers here.
Well, and actually it's more like picking you,
Yeah. Ooh.
It's like picking Andy, because what I see happening is when people are working with flower essences regularly, it really roots us into ourselves. It roots us into a level of strength and wisdom, and also just kind of like a spacious container. I'm not going to say that if you take flower essences, you'll have no stress. That's not the point at all. But you start feeling like you have more elasticity or resiliency, so that like if an intense emotion arises, you don't feel like you're right in the middle of it and you're swept up out of control. It's like, oh, wow, there's that thing. Huh, interesting. And there's like a little bit of space between you and it, so that you can just kind of observe it. Like, oh, wow, that's really interesting. Rather than just like,
Right. Yeah. The violent reactions or yeah. So a little space, a little even sort of more, sounds like kind of a Zen, like sort of a thing of like, yeah, I think that's what we're all striving for.
And the ones you took. So Inner Peace has a variety of flowers for, just to fill in your listeners here, for like when you have a lot going on, a lot on your plate, a lot of change, transition. It's good for like big life changes, like you're moving or you're having a baby, or like things are just shifting around and you just feel kind of like overwhelmed and like you could use a little bit more support. It's a really commonly, like a lot of men are attracted to that blend. It's very grounding, strengthening. Yeah, it's a really good one for anyone experiencing high levels of stress. Then True Strength. True Strength is interesting. Right. It's about rooting you into your strength. It's also can heal old father wound stuff. It can give you this like really wild kind of persistence and determination. Like I can do anything. I can make anything happen. It can help you feel more rooted into a sense of community. Like you have a circle of support around you because there's redwood in there.
Oh, cool.
And you know how redwoods are in circles and communities?
Yeah, all trees, right? But like especially redwoods. I mean, they're like the oldest. I mean, it has been sort of in conjunction with, me trying to change my mindset in terms of money, in terms of goals, and just sort of being like having a certainty that they will come, they are happening, they're already mine, like that. And I think that's maybe part of it is like, I'm doing all sorts of different things. So it's hard to know what is which. And also with like what I said, in terms of COVID, Mexico, different personal family stuff happening, like
it's a lot.
All that. Yeah, it is a lot. So it's sort of hard to delineate, but it's almost like, part of me is like, well, maybe I need to isolate each one. Like if this was an experiment, right? Like it would not, there's too many variables happening. But I'm also not necessarily, sorry, go.
No, I see what you're saying. Yeah. I've done that before where I'll just take one remedy just so I can like really hit it hard and see what does this particular one thing do for me. Were you also working with Boundless Wisdom?
I was. Yeah. And actually, that was the one that tastes the best to me.
Ooh.
Yeah, I'll do my rankings now in terms of taste. This is the most Andy thing to do. Boundless wisdom in terms of was number 1. True strength was number 2. Expansive presence was number 3 in terms of taste. Inner peace was number 4.
Okay.
Wild abundance number 5. And then luminous chi was in last place, but I would actually say that I used that one probably third most. Because I think that was when I probably used a lot in conjunction with edibles, because it was sort of like, ooh, I just like was sort of already feeling good and wanted to like amp up the chi and just like, okay, sort of keep going. And I
know something strange.
Yeah.
Luminous chi. I mean, I have no idea if this comes into play, but luminous chi would also reduce paranoia.
That actually, that's cool. Like that, like my body sort of maybe, because I mean, obviously that is a function that can occur on the edibles. So that's interesting. Oh,
if you could argue that what tastes the best to you is what's best for you. Boundless wisdom is a freaking amazing remedy because it can dig into old traumas. It can like liberate old stuff that's stuck from childhood. It makes you more kind of like flexible and open and not get too like, I really want things to happen this way. You can just kind of like take it as it comes. And it also makes your mind pretty quiet so that insights or, like flashes of insight or wisdom can arise. At PTSD, if anybody has PTSD, that's like the remedy. Boundless wisdom is so good for that.
It sounds like that one, I mean, listening to my body or my taste buds, that might be the one to focus on going forward, especially like a quiet mind. That in some ways is what I'm chasing. I don't want to quiet to the point where I'm not getting ideas, but that's not necessarily a concern. Those have always come. It's more of like being able to chill about them, or sort of, slow down. So
sometimes I find that we're afraid of space. Have you ever been, like, for example, have you ever been in a conversation and it gets quiet and there's a moment of silence? And there are certain people that it's like, wow, the silence feels so good. And then there are other times with other people that it's like, oh my God, I got to say something. I got to fill the space. This is so uncomfortable. Oh my God, why is it so quiet? Why is he not saying anything? There's like the two.
That's me. Yeah.
Okay. So then you're right. Boundless wisdom would be a good one because it just lets you like sink into the present. And it's like, wow, present moment. Everything feels so great and spacious and quiet and wide open. And there's nothing scary about it. It's like luscious and tasty, versus like,
that's the noise that is definitely that you've used a couple of times. It definitely feels like my brain noise. But yeah, even last night, like I was just sort of on the patio with my partner. We were having a glass of wine. It was just really nice, but it was quiet. And in my head, I'm like, wait, I need to like ask questions. I need to like come up with something to talk about. And I'm like, wait, no, I don't. But like, I'm constantly that person. But also when I find that piece or that space, I immediately want to share it or record it or like bottle it, sort of like, I mean, not that you're doing that with the flowers, but in a way it's like, ooh, I want to put this in there so I can save it for later. But then the act of doing that, I'm like, oh, it's gone. I popped the balloon. So those definitely, wisdom seems like a nice thing to have.
So tell me where you're at right now. Like if I'm going to send you like a few more months worth of remedies so you can, keep it going. Tell me the dirt. Like, I'm sure there's like a lot of really amazing, and this is what I tell everyone. I'm sure there's a lot of amazing things happening in your life, like truly amazing. I don't want to hear it. I want to know the dirt. Tell me what bugs you, irritating you.
What bugs me? Okay. Let's see. Well, I would say, I think I've been battling with sort of that control. And when I've been feeling the overwhelm, it's when I lose a little bit of control on my schedule, which in some ways is why I, quit my job and to follow this is to be the master of my own schedule. But then as I've entered in the VO thing, it's like, even when I get a job, I focus on, now I don't have this, I'm at the mercy of when they want to have me. And, but I would say what I've been struggling with is boundaries. And that is and I'm to the point where I'm like aware that I have for a long time had porous boundaries and goes both ways. But now I'm definitely, I think, voicing them, but it's definitely very clunky and almost feels like combative in my way of like defensive, like boundaries, like, oh no, I don't want to. So I think that, but I still, in terms of, let's see, what's more dirt. I think I have felt a little bit less motivated in terms of social things, but I think that also kind of goes with the boundary of like being more aware that I have less Andy coins than I always think to spend on social interactions. Like I want to say yes to everything. So I think, but then I always have the other thing where I'm like, I really sort of feel like I want to do more stuff. But that's, to me, feels like maybe it's working, and that like I'm not jumping out of, a moving car to say yes to everything that comes to me. But let's see, to me, I think what has still been frustrating is that I still, like, I had a pitch thing recently for a children's story that I'm shopping. And I think pitching and talking is, generally what I'm good at. But when it becomes this formal thing, when it becomes something where I'm having to, sell something when money's involved, or when it seems professional, that's when I feel like I lose the me. It feels like I am not at ease. I don't have inner peace, even though I did, I definitely try. Like, that was one of those scenarios where I did the whole all six.
Wait, so what's making you feel not at ease?
I think it's the anxiety. Events and things that build up tends to be what really affect, make me anxious. And that can be like softball, which I mentioned earlier, which is something that I take very seriously and want to. It's the things that I feel like I'm good at and have responsibility. And also, there's other people involved in it, perhaps. And that's pretty much everything. But yeah, the things that I have a really high opinion of myself on, or see that like, oh, I can do these things, there's stakes involved. And that's when I like freak out, and I think that's always been,
even though you're really good at them?
I think that's why, like if I wasn't good at baseball or softball, I wouldn't be nervous about it. I probably wouldn't play, but I just like, there's more expectation on myself or pressure on myself, or.
But thereby who? You?
Oh, I definitely think it came from, there is some parental like pressure that it like as a kid.
Yeah, but your parents aren't pressuring you now.
Right. No, not anymore. No.
Well,
but it's definitely from me.
Yourself.
It's, yeah. No, but I think that's sort of, I've always had this high opinion of myself, or like, I think I've been afraid to have a high opinion of myself, but I feel like to do what I'm doing, I need to like believe in myself somewhat. But then I'm like making it so hard by being like, oh, this needs to be the greatest podcast episode that we've ever recorded. Like there's no way I could.
What if you totally screw up?
That would be a nightmare. Yeah. Like I don't actually know in this scenario what that would be. Right. Other than like just not showing up, or I guess the things are always technology based. Like if I find out that the volume is the sound is terrible, or that like I didn't record it, which has happened on previous like podcasts on old podcasts, like and that's like devastating, those mistakes.
Let me ask you this.
Yeah.
If you're just a total absolute failure, what does that mean about you? Like if you fail the softball game, you screwed up the sound, the podcast didn't go right, you didn't get the voiceover, or like something just real bad went wrong.
Right. My relationship with my wife, like all those different things. That would be the worst of all those.
What would that mean about you?
There's a lot of different voices coming out for that. There's part of it is like, well, that's, if all those things happen, clearly I'm not doing something, not necessarily right or wrong, but it's like, there's part of it is like, oh, that's what you deserve. Like, but that's that voice, it shows up, but I don't listen to it, or I don't actually believe that. But if that had happened, I'm sure I would be there. Because like, if all those different things where it's like, oh, you should have prepared more, or you should have been a better husband. You should have practiced, gone to the batting cage, bought a new glove, all the different things that you like, the what ifs. I think that's where I would go, is and that's where my brain goes of like, how could I have done this differently? Yeah. And like the biggest mistakes I've done, I often, try to rewrite those days and see where, not necessarily where it went wrong, but just sort of imagine a day where that didn't happen, rather than accept that it happened and learn from it, move on, which, I'm getting better at, I think this is evidence of that, in some way, but, sure. But yeah, no, to take the sting out of failure, I think fear of failure has always been like number one for me, but, yep. But I've been trying to change the definition of that. And failure is like necessary or expected in what I'm trying to do, and to
how we learn.
Yeah, exactly. Every day, I had a friend, Russ, who might be listening. Hi, Russ. He did this thing that I admire the hell out of, where he kept track of how many rejections he got when he was sending in stories, and he was celebrating them. He had like 150 one year. And of course, he sold so many, not 150, but he sold like multiple stories in the act of doing all that. And he was really, I loved that. And that is that feels out of reach to me, but at the same time, why is it out of reach to me? Like, cause I think I'm close to accepting that, but I think there still is this old voice that's like, oh, Katie's going to regret sending me, flower elixirs, regret spending her time here. Who the fuck is Andy, and why, like that is always there, but I can quiet that voice or not believe it.
I think everybody's got that voice. Especially right. If you were born in the United States, you've got that somewhere in there. It's like a collective. I always think of it in terms of like, we have maybe three. We have like inherited patterns that we inherited from like 6 to 8 generations back in our family lineage. And this is not to blame our parents. This is more just like what we think is really unique that's banging around in our head. We think it's just us and no one can hear it, is likely similar thought patterns to our great-grandmother, great-grandfather, right? We inherited some things from them. Then we have acquired patterns, which are like things that we learned in childhood as we were growing up. X happened, then that means this about me.
Right.
We have those kind of beliefs. And then we have what are sometimes called planetary or collective beliefs, which is like, you saw like the last couple of years, what happens with collective fear patterns, or what have you. It's like some part of us is tapped into this greater collective energy field and we start feeling things. So I think what you're experiencing, I know what you're experiencing is very common. It's like a very human thing. In terms of boundaries, there is this one blend that we have, I'm going to send you, called Luscious Embodiment. Luscious Embodiment. It sounds awesome, and it is awesome. But you don't necessarily think like boundaries, but there are some flowers in there that make you set boundaries. And the crazy thing is the way that it happens. Because if you start working with that remedy, it will show you everywhere that you leak energy, everywhere you let somebody just step over you a little too much or take advantage of you, everywhere where you're too nice, where you just like leak a little too much energy, or a little too nice, a little too giving. It will show you all of those places. And then you'll start feeling angry about it. And then that anger kind of like spurs you on to make a change and draw the line. It's a really interesting process. And then when you were saying, I really want to set boundaries, but I'm worried about like when I voice them, it feels combative. Then you can mix in a blend that we have called Truth Teller, which is a combination of flowers for like not only speaking your mind and speaking your truth, and not being afraid to hurt people's feelings, and not being afraid to sound combative, because you just won't. If you're not afraid of it, you just won't. Like if you're afraid of sounding combative, you might.
Yeah, because that's what fear does.
Awkward, yeah. If you're afraid of being awkward, you might be. But if you're like fearless about being awkward, you won't be. It's that funny thing, right? And then there's another flower in there called Black Bat, because it looks like a bat that takes like rage that's buried in our system, which is something that's really common for men, I find. All humans, I think we're all a little bit like, ooh, what happens if I actually let that shit go free? Like, what happens if people see my rage? Is it going to destroy everything? It's a little scary. What if I express my rage? But instead of, like bottling it, we can use that energy of anger to know the moments where it's time to stand up for ourselves or advocate for someone else. So those two are like really good blends to work with together for setting boundaries and then being able to like verbalize it freely, easily. What else was I going to say? Oh, and then this new one that came out probably after we talked. It's called Sacred Heart. And it's about really just being able to like sit with whatever arises, whether it's like, what if I screw up? What if I fail? What if I don't do it? What if I do a bad job? What if I can't do it? That kind of like,
the never ending. Yeah.
It just helps us like drop it, put it down, and be friends with ourselves. It's like kind of like that fairy godmother who's like, you got this. Like, no, of course you're good at this. Like, oh, of course you're good at podcasting, Andy. You're good at softball. You're good at your relationship with your wife. So why would you fail? Like, those are all the things you're good at. It's that kind of pep talk almost.
Yeah, a pep talk, and also just sort of a reframing or recentering. And I mean, that sounds like kind of compassion for self, and also, yeah, I mean, that I think maybe even giving grace to yourself too. Like that to me is like what I've been trying to work on, and to just do less. Do less but better is sort of like an essentialist sort of thing. I read Essentialism, a book about that, and I'm like, okay, yeah, I'm trying to do so many things at once. Yeah, no, like I'm at the beginning of like, okay, even when I think I'm doing less things, I can still always do less. So I'm on that journey. I would love to. That's a whole nother episode to talk about essentialism, perhaps, with you, because I'd love to know how you're doing that, because it does feel like you're doing a lot of things as well.
I could probably listen to that like a few more times. It's like, God, why don't, fortunately, like cars don't have CD players anymore, because I had like the CD set and you could just like listen to it over and over. The thing I remember about that particular set of kind of, it's not really necessarily rules, but like things like meters, is what I loved is he was like, if it's a 9 or a 10, like you can kind of rate something like from a 0 to 10. Or another way of expressing it would be like, if somebody approaches you about something and you're like, fuck yeah, that's definitely a yes. And if you're not, fuck yeah, then don't do it.
Right. Yeah. And then that's basically the only metric you need. If it's not a fuck yes, then don't do it. I think that, and having a couple seconds for me to like, sit with that. Cause I think I'm almost programmed myself to say fuck yes, even if I don't even mean it. So it's like, and also, or I say yes before thinking, and it's like, oh, taking some time to be like, wait, is this really a fuck yes or a yes or where? I think that's part of that too. And that's the journey I'm on for sure. But yeah, I mean, this was a fuck yes in terms of like, oh, try flowers. Cause like, to me, it's like, what's the downside? I doubt I'll be poisoned by it or anything like that. I mean, that would be a cool story if like this random person sends me killer flowers in the mail. Like, that's worth it. That if that's the bad side, that sounds like a fun adventure too. But that was not where I was thinking. I was just like, it's either not going to work, and we're going to talk about it. And I think just the act of like talking to you and thinking about these things, I think that is part of it working, and just giving it that it's on the shelf, and me inspiring me to take some space for it. I can't necessarily say that I feel different than I do, or that I have more, that I'm more abundant or more, have more inner peace. But honestly, after having this conversation, I do sort of feel inspired to do more of it. But also like maybe step back from the pharmaceuticals as well. Cause I think that was in the same way, like, let's try all these things. And it was also kind of my first like self-care thing of like, let's say yes to this, because I've always said people deserve help, but why would I help myself?
That's a cool thing. I love that you said, did you say self-care? Yeah. That's really rare for men. What I found, a couple of years ago, I was like, geez, I really want to expand more into like the male sector of the planet. 99% of our customers are women. And I looked at like, gosh, nature belongs to everyone, not just women. Flowers aren't, I get like women love flowers and stuff, but nature belongs to everyone. So it was like, oh, what do men do? when they're stressed. And I interviewed a bunch of men, and it was like, well, drink, have sex, smoke weed. It was like, oh, interesting. So at least at that moment in time, it was rare to see a man that would like preventatively take care of himself. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, yeah.
But I think that our culture is changing a little bit, and it's kind of seen through the lens of like evolution. Like, am I evolving? Am I growing as a person? Am I reaching my full potential? Am I aware of like my full capacity? Do I have hidden talents that I don't even know I'm good at? Are there things that are there to be uncovered? Are there treasures that are waiting to be discovered inside of me that I haven't found yet? And I think that's where it gets really interesting. And I can see maybe more men coming along as like, this is an adventure. And the journey is like inside of ourselves. It's not out there, it's in here. And that what I can tell you is from my experience, what I know is that when you change someone's inner world, their outer world changes. When someone feels more peaceful inside, like we've all had that experience where we're like, we get up and we're like on the wrong side of the bed and we're just like cranky bitchy about stuff. And we're like cursing somebody who's like cutting us off in traffic, getting all the red lights. We're late. God, why am I doing this? Like what? Then we get down on ourselves, and it's just like obstacle after obstacle after obstacle. And then conversely, like you have a morning where you wake up great, everything's great, you feel good, you're laughing, the birds are singing, you're getting all the green lights, everybody's happy,
Yeah.
And so I think a lot of that has to do with our inner state. And so if we can tap into something that's like natural, there's no side effects, it comes from nature, it comes from the earth, that's 4.5 billion years old, there's some wisdom there. It's easy to take, it's not expensive, we don't need a gym membership, it doesn't require 10 hours of meditation a day. Sure, why not? Okay, I'll try it. And then over time, as the inner world changes, the outer world changes. I see people when they hit their like 4-month mark, like they've been regularly taking flower essences for 4 months. That's when they start saying like, oh, I changed my job, I changed my relationships, my friendships changed, because it's like enough time in this kind of matrixy universe and how it all works that the outer world has enough time to shift and reflect back to us what's happening on the inner world state.
Right. Like if you are embodying green lights, the green lights come. And actually in a very silly way Matthew McConaughey wrote a book called Green Lights. I've listened to it, and it was like, I'm listening to it and be like, God, everything amazing just happens to this guy, and like all of these stories, but it's because of exactly what you're saying. Like, it's his attitude, Zen for life. And like the doors are open in his mind always. So then in life, it sort of reflects that. Like people want to open the door for this guy, and that's how I've been thinking about money too. Like I was always hating it or in fear of it or thinking it would make me a bad person, which is then sending this like big front of like, no money's going to come in. Why would I? So I can just hate it. But, and feel like, I'm against capitalism. I'm against money. And that's true. But also it's like, well, I also would like to believe that I can do good things with it and help me thrive and help other people thrive with it. And that's sort of that's what you're doing with your business. And that's what I think we all hopefully are trying to do, like with our life, with our jobs, is to sort of follow that vocation that actually matters to us. And then money will fall.
Oh, it's true. I mean, if you just look at Mother Nature as an example, like one tree produces enough oxygen for 2 people. One fruit tree will give you more fruit than your family can even consume. Mother Nature's exponential. Let me tell you something really cool.
Yeah.
In Tokyo, when they look at the forest bathing, it's called Shinrin-yoku in Japanese. It's basically forest bathing, which is spending time in nature energies. So the Tokyo Medical School did a bunch of studies, and they found that if you spend time in nature like that, your adrenaline goes down, your cortisol goes down, your white blood cell count goes up. So essentially your stress goes down and your immune system is boosted. They found all sorts of interesting like physical correlations, like preventative of the C word and all kinds of things. But for the sake of this conversation, where I get super geeked out is when you look at the exponentiality of things. Like they found that if you spend one day in the wild, those health benefits last in your body for 1 week. If you spend 2 days in the wild consecutively, the health benefits last for 1 month.
Whoa.
Yes. So if Mother Nature is a reflection of us, that means that exponentiality is real. It's a real thing. So when we look at abundance in our life, getting money, there's nothing bad about getting money. What's negative is people who are corrupt and do bad things in order to get the money. If you're just hustling and you get money, that's like an energy return for what you've given out, you know? It's like, my question is like, how do I help 1 million people each month? I'm not there yet. I am not there yet. And if I help 1 million people each month, will more revenue come? Absolutely. Am I personally motivated by money? No.
Right. It's the help. Yeah.
Because, yeah, it's great to have money, but like at a certain point, you have your needs met.
Right.
So then what? You know, I mean, you're not one of those kind of people who's going to like buy 15 yachts and a jet. I mean, maybe okay, get a jet plane. And then what?
Then I'll be happy. No, that's not me. Yeah.
Ultimately, you give back to other people.
Right.
So the whole point of making money is just to have more to help other people with. So you don't have to worry about your head not being screwed on right. You're incorruptible in that way, you know? So let it rip, you know, let it rip. That's the way of the world. Like, do you think the trees are like, oh no, we've got to hold back. Like we can't like nourish these humans that much.
Right. Yeah. We'll do 50% oxygen today. Yeah.
Cut them off.
Yeah, it's true. Trees don't wake up on the wrong side of the bed. You know, like they're not like, oh, this is a terrible day. Let's not generate oxygen for everyone. Thank God, you know, thank trees for that. Yeah.
If you look at things in nature, flowers, trees, whatever, they're not wondering like, am I taking up too much space? Am I too big? Am I too small? Do I look funny? Do I smell bad? Am I like, okay, am I good enough? Like, no, you know, they're just like, yeah, this is me. And in a way, it's like each one of us are flowers. Each one of us are trees. You know, it's like the idea is like, how do we maximize our, you know, the things that make us uniquely us, that are different. And instead of that being like a hindrance and an awkward point, it's like an asset. Yeah, you're different. You're exotically different.
And to take that like further, I think sort of what this, I mean, the self-care thing is, it's like, if I'm a plant, it's how do I best grow? How like I need to think about my soil, the planter, like where I need to be positioned in terms of the sun and all those things. And I mean, and that's, I think what it is. And I think that's sort of what this last year has been for me to be finally like, oh, okay. I think I've had a lot of fortune in terms of health, but now it's like that can only last so long. And I want to also just continue to be curious about, what is the best way for me to grow? And also like, hopefully have a big planter where we're all, you know, sharing, you know, the roots in some ways. Yeah. I don't necessarily know where LOTUSWEI fits in there yet, but it does, you know, it's certainly above many other things that I've tried. And it also like, I just believe in the power of like, well, I got this random email and now we're talking and this is really cool. Like that to me means something, and almost it means enough just on its own to just like that connection. And I feel like we're sort of winding down, but I realize I didn't ask you this, and it would have been maybe a good question at the beginning, but like, how did you find flowers? Like what brought you to here?
It was a lot of wishes. It was like a wish when I was 7 years old to find my people and to find what I was really here to do. Cause I was pretty lonely. And I was like, I know I'm supposed to be doing something else. I was like trying to astral project myself to where I really needed to be. You know, that never really worked.
Even at 7, you were doing that.
It didn't really work though. And then after that, it was like a little bit of searching after college. Like, where is it? Where is it? Okay, I'm ready now. Where is it? What is the thing? How am I going to help people? You know, and then it comes down to like, actually, how am I going to help myself? And through, I ended up, the short story is I ended up running into an expert in flower essences who was from Spain. I ended up running into him in Mexico. As soon as I listened to him teach, I was like, this is it. I will do this for the rest of my life. He said, if we can get 3% of the world's population actively working with flower essences, it's enough of a ripple effect, a tipping point, so to speak, that it will change the outcome of the future, that the future will change. And I thought, I can do that. 3%? I could devote the rest of my life to getting 3% of the world's population to work with these, no problem. If that's really what's at stake here. And if every flower on the planet heals some neurotic tendency that we have, basically anything we could ever imagine, how cool is that?
Yeah.
And then in the end, you realize really the only way you can make an impact is to awaken yourself. Like really, truly. Flower essences can show you which way to go. They can open a door. Ultimately, all of us need to walk through that door ourselves.
Right.
And then once we walk through, others go, that's really interesting. Maybe I'll walk through too. And
right. They see Katie walk through the door and where your life has gone from then. And it makes them want to go through that door too. Right. Like that's sort of, yeah. And
we have to walk our talk. It's like, it's funny. I have one spiritual teacher who says like, he says, like, gosh, I think all these people who are like on their like green platform and save the world and plant more trees. And, not that planting trees is a great thing to do. It really is. But the kind of attitude of like, I have to save the world. And he was like, he blew me away one day. He was like, humans can't save the world. Only trees can. I was like, oh my God. That's so funny. Here we are thinking we're so like important when actually, what if the only thing on this planet that actually has the capacity to save the planet are the trees? And
we just need to get out of the way.
Yeah, we need to get out of the way. But then also like we want to save people. We want to save other people. We want to save our family members. We want to save our lovers, etc. And really the only person we can save is ourselves. But once we do that, and once we like really hone in on like, what are those things that I can actively discipline myself to be a better person, that rubs off on other people and will inspire others.
Yeah. And I think that is sort of the programming that I, especially as the white male, all the movies and TV shows are sort of, until the last 5 years, we're sort of geared to promoting that idea of saving the world, saving other people. They looked like me, or there was like, it felt like that was some sort of a calling or what you could do then it's, well, there's some arrogance in that, but also like a lot, but there's also just the idea that, I agree. It's just you can't help other people. They can only help yourselves. And that obviously then extends to yourself. I guess I wanted to bring it back to sort of, I think, what attracted you to my flower, which is that it's the masculine part, the men that, is the 1% of the 1% of your business. And I wonder, I don't know necessarily if like I would, poll my friends about this, man and woman, if it would be a big split on like whether people would think it was too woo and it would work or not. Mm-hmm. So I don't know necessarily, but it definitely, I think it's just more, at least how I'm thinking about it. It just feels like you said, self-care in men is very new. And hopefully that's now tipping the scale slightly. And then, we will all collectively find out what works for us or find the flowers. I don't know. I'm curious. Why? Because obviously that was sort of one of the reasons. Like I'm in a way kind of a test case, right? And I sort of would like to know, where do we go from here, or what? Were there any sort of more, I guess, man-related questions that you wanted to ask me, or that could? But maybe this is me doing exactly what you just said, where it's like, I only need to worry about myself, and I'm sort of doing that. But here I am now, like, well, now we need to save all men. So I'm like doing the circle just in that.
If you're trying something new and then your guy friends see it and you're like, yeah, I tried this. It was really cool. Actually, it actually worked. That's kind of how it happens, right?
Right.
We need men to be at their most powerful. I think in the last few years, there's been all this weird stuff going on about like, quote unquote, toxic masculinity or whatever BS that is, which I just think is BS. Like, let's just say human toxicity. Like all of us as humans can be toxic if we choose to be, or we can embrace like the purest essence of who we are at our core. But like, we need men to be powerful. We need men to be protectors. We need men to be strong. We need men to be rooted and centered in the truth of who they are. That's good. That's a good thing. So yeah, I mean, any way that I can, and I think, The Naked Man, that's like such a cool title of a podcast. And like, I think that's where we like get a lot of our strength from, is being able to be naked and be okay with it. And I don't necessarily mean like physically naked, although that's fun too, but like, to be vulnerable, to be real, to be honest, to be direct, is pretty powerful. Super, super powerful in today's day and age. Like, people are longing for authenticity. They are longing for truth in a way that I have never seen before. We've been going on these like Flower Lounge tour events. Like, we went to Maryland, like DC, Baltimore area. Then we went to Austin, Texas. Then we went to Miami. And I tell you, Andy, I have never in my life been at this moment where I see so many people yearning for sincerity and truth and people just being real. The days of like the Hollywood celebrities and even like social media influencers who are kind of fakey, I don't know. I think it's kind of over. It's like people just want realness, truth, sincerity. And I don't know, the more we can embody that and use practices and methods and things like flower essences and meditation and other things to really draw that out of ourselves, people will be attracted to that for sure. Who doesn't want to be powerful? Who doesn't want to be like the most powerful version of themselves?
I don't know. I think it's the people that, it's for so long. I think I think that's what the toxic masculinity did in some way. It cowed us in terms of like, well, I'm afraid to fuck up. I'm afraid even more now, afraid to accidentally. And that's what we do. But also I think just as a society,
a strategic agenda, if you really dig deep, that was kind of a strategic thing that is designed to weaken a population. If you ask the opposite question, like, what's powerful about us? What's powerful about you, Andy? What's powerful about your loved ones? What's powerful about your wife? Like, that's exciting.
That is exciting. And I think, removing like gender and sex from the equation is also, I think, what I'm interested in going for. Like, this is sort of a tease, but I'm already thinking like, oh, The Naked Man might already sound outdated to me, in terms of like, to me, that feels like that identity was chosen for me. What identity, Andy doesn't necessarily have to mean, I get to choose what that means. And that's, I think, where I'm at. And as you said, this podcast and then, all the things that I'm trying to do, and this includes, and by your example, also following your example and the people that I bring on, is to keep me accountable to become me and to step in the power of that and sort of learn what that is. Cause I think for so long was doing what I thought was what I was supposed to do, or what, I was sort of faking it. And that I got so good at faking it, I didn't know what real Andy was. So thank you for, I guess, validating the concept of the show and finding me, but also thank you for the help and for, just for being yourself and for, doing you so well. I really appreciate it. Especially the way I sort of met you. It wouldn't have surprised me if you weren't necessarily genuine, but it's really cool to have met you, and I'm excited for future. I want to go to the flower.
There's one in, I don't know when this episode will actually like pop out, but there's one in Charleston and on September 8th. And then there's another in Phoenix, beginning of November. And then hopefully we'll get back on the road next year, maybe possibly in Europe. So yeah.
That's so cool. So I will definitely put in all your information in the show notes. Thank you so much. Any parting wisdom from the flowers before we go here?
Oh, what an awesome question. Well, I'm going to send you like a bunch of months worth of flower essences because I think you should really give it a go for a few more months.
Okay.
Any parting words from the flowers? Let's see. What a cool question.
Like if it's easier, I could ask, what flower are you thinking of in this moment or trying to embody?
Oh, I mean, my favorite is always night blooming jasmine because when you look at it, there's nothing really special about it. Just kind of like a little white star. It doesn't look ostentatious or interesting or like bright colors or anything. But when you walk by at night, it's like, whoa, like you cannot help but stop and be like totally pulled into this other world that you didn't know existed. And I think that's in some ways something that I strive to do with the flower essences is, look unassuming, but then as soon as people walk by, just like pull them into a new world. And
I love that.
That would be like a world inside of yourself that you always knew was there. When you're a kid, like if you think about some of your first experiences in nature as a kid, probably all of us have like dug in the dirt and made mud pies and like played around with weeds and tasted things and touched things and built forts and gotten dirty, and like crushed up berries. And like, we knew how magical everything was at that point in time. So if we just opened ourselves even like a little bit to a little bit more of that world, like go out in your backyard. If you're still listening, go out in your backyard or go to a park or go get to like a little patch of grass in the alley or whatever. And if you just kind of like sit and tune in, you can kind of start to see the magic again. And I don't know, we can live in a world that's like very square and boring, or we can go back to remember from our childhood that actually it's pretty magical. And that plant life is existing all around us in order to support us in our growth. Then we don't feel so alone, then it's like, what? Like every tree and flower and plant and bush that is around me is like helping me in some way. Like, that's where who was it who said like nature is my church? It's like when you really are struggling with something internally and you go outside and you look at the trees and you look at the leaves and you look at the stuff swaying in the wind, it's like, okay, maybe I'm actually not so alone. Maybe everything is conspiring for me. Not me. Maybe everything is conspiring for me.
And I am conspiring for you.
Thank you.
And thank you for taking some time. I will come up with my flower the next time we talk. That's my mission for myself. Yeah.
Deal.
All right. Perfect.
Thanks,
Thank you all for listening. In some ways, perhaps this felt like a promo for LOTUSWEI, for a product, and I imagine a lot of skepticism in regards to this episode because of it, or perhaps that's just me creating it out of thin air. But please, be skeptical. I still am. But I'm not skeptical about Katie herself, and that's what I care about. Katie said that when she was a kid, she tried and failed to astral project herself to where she needed to be, but the way I see it, she succeeded. Listening back to our conversation, I was reminded of child Andy and how every walk to the tiny pond in the tiny forest by our house felt like an adventure, steps away from my own secret garden. I'm looking forward to embodying that Andy, that sense of magic and wonder that comes in nature as soon as it's not 100 degrees outside. I hope you all got as much out of this as I did, or at least are inspired to be curious about the ways that can make you feel better or be a better you. I don't think there's one remedy or one way to do any of this. The only thing that matters is a desire to help yourself and get curious. Since I recorded this episode, I stopped my meds. I haven't felt any difference in my anxiety levels, and indeed, I felt more me, more empowered in taking care of myself, and we'll be talking about what that means in our next episode. Instead of a soundtrack this week, I will link Katie's meditations in the show notes. Please rate and subscribe to us on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. It takes 3 seconds to click on the star emblem in Spotify and give me that sweet, sexy 5 stars. Follow us on Facebook and Instagram at NakedManPod, and don't hesitate to reach out to us at nakedmanpod@gmail.com. If you have any thoughts and feelings you'd like to share, call and leave a message at the Naked Man phone line at 747-231-7120. In the meantime, as my dad always says, be sweet. This episode of the Naked Man Podcast was conceived by Andy Green in collaboration with Katie Hess. The Naked Man is a podcast hosted, created, and produced by me, Andy Green. All music was composed by Robert Panico, and all graphics were created by Christopher Miles.